The Minpins by Roald Dahl. Read by Olivia MacDonald. Little Billy's mother was always telling him exactly what he was allowed to do and what he was not allowed to do. All the things he was allowed to do were boring. All of the things he was not allowed to do were exciting. One of the things he was never allowed to do, the most exciting of them all, was to go out through the garden gate all by himself and explore the world beyond. On this sunny summer afternoon, little Billy was kneeling on a chair in the living room, gazing out through the window at the wonderful world beyond. His mother was in the kitchen doing the ironing, and although the door was open, she couldn't see him. Every now and again his mother would call out to him, saying, "Little Billy, what are you up to in there?" And little Billy would always call back and say, "I'm being good, Mummy." But little Billy was awfully tired of being good. Through the window, not so very far away, he could see the big, black, secret wood that was called the Forest of Sin. It was something he had always longed to explore. His mother had told him that even grown-ups were frightened of going into the Forest of Sin. She recited a poem to him that was well known in the district. It went like this: "Beware, beware the forest of sin, none come out, but many go in." "Why don't they come out?" little Billy asked her. "What happens to them in the wood?" "That wood," his mother said, "is full of the most bloodthirsty wild beasts in the world." "You mean tigers and lions?" little Billy asked. "Much worse than that," his mother said. "What's worse than tigers and lions, Mummy?" "Wangdoogles are worse," his mother said, "and hornswogglers and snozwanglers and vermicious nids. And worst of all is the terrible, blood-suckling, tooth-plucking, stone-chuckling spittler. There's one of them in there too." "A spittler, Mummy?" "Of course, and when the spittler chases after you, he blows clouds of hot smoke out of his nose." "Would he eat me up?" little Billy asked. "In one gulp," his mother said. Little Billy did not believe a word of this. He guessed his mother was making it up just to frighten him and to stop him ever going out of the house alone. And now little Billy was kneeling on the chair, gazing with longing through the window at the famous Forest of Sin. "Little Billy," his mother called from the kitchen, "what are you doing?" "I'm being good, Mummy," little Billy called back. Just then a funny thing happened. Little Billy began to hear somebody whispering in his ear. He knew exactly who it was. It was the devil. The devil always started whispering to him when he was especially bored. "It would be easy," the devil was whispering. "Just climb out through the window. No one would see you. And in a jiffy you would be in the garden. And in another jiffy you would be through the front gate. And in yet another jiffy you would be exploring the marvellous Forest of Sin all by yourself. It's a super place. Do not believe one word of what your mother says about wangdoodles and hornswogglers and snozwangers and vermicious nids and the terrible blood-suckling, tooth-plucking, stone-chuckling spittler. There are no such things." "What is in there?" little Billy whispered. "Wild strawberries," the devil whispered back. "The whole floor of the forest is carpeted with wild strawberries, every one of them luscious and red and juicy ripe. Go and see for yourself." These were the words the devil whispered softly into little Billy's ear on that sunny summer afternoon. The next moment little Billy had opened the window and was climbing out. In a jiffy he had dropped silently onto the flower bed below. In another jiffy he was out through the garden gate. and in yet another jiffy he was standing on the very edge of the great, big, dark forest of sin. He had made it! He had got there! And now the forest was all his to explore. Was he nervous? What? Who said anything about being nervous? Hornswogglers? Vermicious Nids? What sort of rubbish was that? Little Billy hesitated. I'm not nervous, he said. I'm not in the least bit nervous. Not me. Very, very slowly he walked forward into the great forest. Giant trees were soon surrounding him on all sides, and their branches made an almost solid roof high above his head, blotting out the sky. Here and there little shafts of sunlight shone through the gaps in the roof. There was not a sound anywhere. It was like being among the dead men in an enormous, empty, green cathedral. When he had ventured some distance into the forest, Little Billy stopped and stood quite still listening. He could hear nothing. Nothing at all. There was absolute silence. Or was there? Hold on just 1 second. What was that? Little Billy flicked his head around and stared into the everlasting gloom and doom of the forest. There it was again! There was no mistaking it this time. From far away there came a faint, whoozing, whiffling noise, like a small, gusty wind blowing through the trees. Then it grew louder. Every second it was growing louder, and suddenly it was no longer a small wind. It was a fearsome, swooshing, whooshing, whiffling, snorting sound that sounded as though some gigantic creature was breathing heavily through its nose as it galloped towards him. Little Billy turned and ran. Little Billy ran faster than he had ever run in his life before, but the swooshing, whooshing, whiffling, snorting noise was coming after him. Worse still, it was getting louder. This meant that the thing, the maker of the noise, the galloping creature, was getting closer. It was catching him up. Run, Little Billy, run, run, run! He dodged around massive trees. He skipped over roots and brambles. He bent low to flash under boughs and bushes. He had wings on his feet, he ran so fast. But still the fearsome swooshing and whooshing, whiffling, snorting noise grew louder and louder as it came closer and closer. Little Billy glanced back quickly over his shoulder, and now, in the distance, he saw a sight that froze his blood and made icicles in his veins. What he saw were 2 mighty puffs of orange-red smoke billowing and rolling through the trees in his direction. These were followed by 2 more, whoosh, whoosh, and then 2 more, whoosh, whoosh, and they must surely be coming, Little Billy told himself, from the 2 nose holes of some galloping, panting beast that had smelled him out and was coming after him. His mother's words began thrumming once again in his head. Beware, beware the forest of sin. None come out, but many go in. It's the spittler for sure, Little Billy cried out. Mummy said the spittler blows smoke when it chases you. This one's blowing smoke. The terrible blood-suckling, tooth-pluckling, chone-stuckling spittler, and soon it will catch me up, and I'll be blood-suckled and tooth-plucked and stone-chuckled and chewed up into tiny pieces, and then the spittler will spit me out in a cloud of smoke, and that will be the end of me. Little Billy was running with the speed of an arrow, but each time he glanced back over his shoulder, the puffs of orange-red, smoky breath had gotten closer. They were so close now he could feel the wind of them on the back of his neck. And the noise! It was deafening in his ears, this fearsome, whooshing, swooshing, whiffling, panting noise. Whumph! Whumph! It went. Whumph! 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 It was like the noise made by a steam locomotive pulling out of a station. Then, suddenly, he heard another noise that was somehow more fearsome still. It was the pounding of gigantic, galloping hooves on the floor of the forest. He glanced round again, but the thing, the beast, the monster, or whatever it was hidden from sight by the smoke it shot out as it galloped forward. The smoky breath was billowing all around him now. He could feel its hotness. Worse still, he could smell its smell. The smell was disgusting. It was the stench that comes from deep inside the tummy of a meat-eating animal. "Mummy!" he cried out. "Save me!" Suddenly, directly in front of him, little Billy saw the trunk of an enormous tree. This tree was different from the others because it had branches hanging down very low. While still running, he made a frantic jump for its lowest branch. He caught it and pulled himself up. Then he grabbed the next branch above his head and pulled himself up again. Then again and again, climbing higher and higher to get away from the terrible, snorting, smoke-blowing, smelly-breathed beast down below. He stopped climbing only when he was too exhausted to climb any higher. He looked up, but even now he couldn't see the top of the giant tree. It seemed to go on forever. He looked down. He couldn't see the ground either. He was in a world of green leaves and thick, smooth branches, with no earth or sky in sight. The snorting, smelly, smoke-blowing beast was miles away down below somewhere. He couldn't even hear it any more. Little Billy found a comfortable place where two big branches came together and sat down for a rest. For the moment, at any rate, he was safe. Then something very peculiar happened. There was a huge, smooth branch very close to where little Billy was sitting, and he suddenly noticed that a small square patch of bark on this branch was beginning to move. It was a very small patch, about the size of a postage stamp, and the two sides of it seemed to be splitting down the middle and opening slowly outward, like a pair of shutters on some tiny window. Little Billy sat staring at this extraordinary thing. All at once, a strange, uncomfortable feeling came over him. It felt as though the tree he was sitting in and the green leaves all around him belonged to another world altogether, and that he was a trespasser who had no right to be where he was. He watched intently as the tiny shutters of the tree bark opened wider and wider, and when they were finally open, they revealed a small, squarish window set neatly in the curve of the big branch. There was some sort of yellowish glow coming from deep inside the window. The very next thing little Billy saw was a tiny face at the window. It had appeared suddenly from nowhere, and it was the face of an extremely old man with white hair. Little Billy could clearly see this, despite the fact that the whole of the tiny man's head was no larger than a pea. This ancient miniature face was staring straight at little Billy with the most severe expression on it. The skin on the face was deeply wrinkled all over, but the eyes were as bright as two stars. Now something even more peculiar began to happen. All around him, not only on the huge main trunk of the tree, but also on the big branches that grew out of it, other tiny windows were opening and tiny faces were peering out. Some of these faces belonged to men, and others were clearly women. Here and there the head of a child was seen peering over a windowsill. The heads of these children were no larger than the heads of matchsticks. In the end, there must have been more than 20 small windows all around where little Billy was sitting, and from each window these amazing little faces were peering out. No sound came from any of the watchers. The faces were silent, unmoving, almost ghost-like. Now the tiny old man in the window nearest to Billy seemed to be saying something, but his voice was so soft and whispery, little Billy had to lean right up close to catch his words. "You're in a bit of a twizzler, aren't you?" the little voice was saying. "You can't go down again, because if you do, you'll get guzzled up at once. But you can't possibly sit up here forever either." I know, little Billy gasped. Don't shout, the tiny man said. I'm not shouting, Little Billy said. Then talk softer, the tiny man said. If you talk too loud, your voice will blow me away. But, who are you? Little Billy asked, taking care to speak very softly this time. We are the Minpins, the tiny man said, and we own this wood. I shall come closer, then you will hear me better. The old Minpin climbed out of his window and walked straight down the big, steeply sloping branch, then up another branch until he found a place only a few inches from Little Billy's face. It was amazing to see him walking up and down these almost vertical branches without the slightest trouble. It was like seeing someone walking up and down a wall. How on earth do you do that? Little Billy asked. Suction boots, the Minpin said. We all wear them. You can't live in trees without suction boots. On his feet he was wearing tiny green boots, rather like miniature wellies. His clothes were curiously old-fashioned, mostly brown and black, the sort of thing people wore 200 or 300 years ago. Suddenly, all the other Minpins, men, women and children, were climbing out of their windows and making their ways towards Little Billy. Their suction boots seemed to allow them to walk up and down the steepest branches with the greatest ease, and some were even walking upside down underneath the branches. All of them were wearing these old-fashioned clothes from hundreds of years ago, and several had on very peculiar hats and bonnets. They stood or sat in groups on all the branches around Little Billy, staring at him as though he was someone from outer space. But do all of you actually live inside this tree? Little Billy asked. The old Minpin said, All the trees in this forest are hollow. Not just this one, but all of them. And inside them thousands and thousands of Minpins are living. These great trees are filled with rooms and staircases, not just in the big main trunk, but in most of the other branches as well. This is a Minpin forest, and it's not the only one in England. Could I peep inside? Little Billy said. Of course, said the old Minpin. Put your eye close to that window. He pointed to the one he'd just come out of. Little Billy shifted his position and placed one eye right up against the square hole that was no bigger than a postage stamp. What he now saw was quite marvellous. He saw a room that was lit by a pale yellow light of some sort, and it was furnished with beautifully made miniature chairs and a table. To one side was a four-poster bed. It was like one of the rooms Little Billy had once seen in the Queen's doll's house at Windsor Castle. It's beautiful, Little Billy said. Are they all as lovely as this one? Most are smaller, the old Minpin said. This one is very grand because I am the ruler of this tree. My name is Don Minnie. What's yours? My name is Little Billy, Little Billy said. Greetings, Little Billy, Don Minnie said. You are welcome to look into some of the other rooms if you wish. We are very proud of them. All of the other Minpin families wanted to show Little Billy their own rooms. They rushed about the branches calling out, Come and see mine! Please come and see mine! Little Billy began climbing about and peeping into tiny windows. Through one window he saw a bathroom, just like his own at home, only 1,000 times smaller. And through another he saw a classroom with lots of tiny desks and a blackboard at one end. In every room there was a stairway in one corner leading to the room above. As Little Billy went from window to window, the Minpins followed him, clustering round and smiling at his exclamations of wonder. They're all absolutely marvellous, he said. They're much nicer than our rooms at home. When the sightseeing tour was over, little Billy sat down again on a large branch and said to the whole company of Minpins, "Look, I've had a lovely time with you all, but how am I ever going to get home again? My mother will be going crazy." "You can never get down from this tree," Don Minnie said. "I've told you that. If you're stupid enough to try, you'll be eaten up in 5 seconds." "Is it the spittler?" little Billy asked. "Is it the terrible, blood-suckling, tooth-pluckling, stone-chuckling spittler?" "I've never heard of any spittler," Don Minnie said. "The one waiting for you down there is the fearsome gruncher, the red-hot, smoke-belching gruncher. He grunches up everything in the forest. That's why we have to live up here. He has grunched up hundreds of humans and literally millions of minpins. What makes him so dangerous is his amazing and magical nose. His nose can smell out a human or a minpin or any other animal for 10 miles. Then he gallops towards it at a terrific speed. He can never see anything in front of him because of all the smoke he belches out from his nose and mouth, but that doesn't bother him. His nose tells him exactly where to go." "Why does he blow out all that smoke?" little Billy asked. "Because he's got red-hot fire in his belly," Don Minnie said. "The gruncher likes his meat roasted, and the fire roasts it as it goes down." "Look," little Billy said. "Gruncher or no gruncher, I've simply got to get home somehow. I'll have to make a dash for it." "Don't try it, I beg you," Don Minnie said. "The gruncher knows you're up here. He's down there now waiting for you. Climb down a little bit lower with me, and I'll show you." Don Minnie walked easily, straight down the side of the great tree trunk. Little Billy climbed carefully down after him, from one branch to the next. Soon, below them, they began to smell the revolting hot stench of the gruncher's breath, and the orange-red smoke was now billowing up the lower branches in thick clouds. "What does he look like?" little Billy whispered. "Nobody knows," Don Minnie answered. "He makes so much smoke and steam you can never see him. If you are behind him, you can sometimes catch glimpses of little bits of him because all the smoke is being blown out in front. Some minpins say they have seen his back legs, huge and black and very hairy, shaped like lions' legs, but 10 times as big. It is rumoured that his head is like an enormous crocodile's head, with rows and rows and rows of sharp, pointed teeth. But nobody really knows. Mind you, he must have gigantic nose holes to be able to blow out all that smoke." They stayed still, listening, and they could hear the gruncher prowling the ground at the base of the tree with his giant hooves and snorting with greed. "He smells you," Don Minnie said. "He knows you aren't far away. He'll wait forever to get you now. He adores humans, and he doesn't catch them very often. Humans are like strawberries and cream to him. You see, for months he's been living on a diet of minpins, and 1,000 minpins is not even a snack for him. The brute is ravenous." Little Billy and Don Minnie climbed back up the tree to where all the other minpins were gathered. They seemed glad to see little Billy come back safely. "Stay up here with us," they said to him. "We'll look after you." Just then a lovely blue swallow alighted on a branch not far away, and little Billy saw a mother minpin and her 2 children climb quite casually onto the swallow's back. Then the swallow took off and flew away with its passengers seated comfortably between its wings. "Good heavens!" cried little Billy. "Is that a special tame bird?" "Not at all," Don Minnie said. "We know all the birds. The birds are our friends. We use them all the time for going places. That lady is taking her children to see their grandmother who lives in another forest about 50 miles away. They'll be there in less than an hour." "Can you talk to them?" little Billy asked. "To the birds, I mean." "Of course we can talk to them," Don Minnie said. "We can summon them any time we want if we want to go somewhere. How else would we get our supplies of food up here? The red-hot gruncher makes it impossible for us to walk anywhere in the wood." "Do the birds like doing this for you?" little Billy asked. "They'll do anything for us," Don Minnie said. "They love us and we love them. We store food for them inside the trees so they don't starve when the icy cold winter comes." Suddenly all sorts of birds were alighting on the branches of the tree around where little Billy was sitting, and the minpins were climbing onto their backs in droves. Most of the minpins had small sacks slung on their shoulders. "At this time of day they go off to collect food," Don Minnie said. "All the grown-ups have to help in getting food for the community. The population of each tree looks after itself. Our large trees are like your cities and towns, and the small trees are like your villages." It was an astonishing sight. Every kind of wonderful bird was flying in and perching on the branches of the great tree, and as soon as one landed, a minpin would climb onto its back, and off they would go. There were blackbirds and thrushes and skylarks and ravens and starlings and jays and magpies and many other kinds of birds. It was all very fast and well organised. Each bird seemed to know exactly which minpin it was collecting, and each minpin knew exactly which bird he or she had ordered for the morning. "The birds are our cars," Don Minnie said to little Billy. "They are much nicer and they never crash." Soon all the grown-up minpins, excepting Don Minnie, had flown away on birds, and only the tiny children were left. Then the robins came in, and the children began climbing on their backs and going off for short flights. Don Minnie said to little Billy, "The children all practice learning to fly on robins. Robins are sensible and careful birds, and they love the little ones." Little Billy simply stood there staring. He could hardly believe what he was seeing. While the children were practising on the robins, little Billy said to Don Minnie, "Is there no way in the world of getting rid of that disgusting, red-hot, smoke-belching gruncher down below?" "The only time a gruncher dies," Don Minnie said, "is if he falls into deep water. The water puts out the fire inside him, and then he's dead. The fire to a gruncher is like your heart to you. Stop your heart and you die at once. Put out the fire and the gruncher dies in 5 seconds. That's the only way to kill a gruncher." "Now hang on a minute," little Billy said. "Is there by any chance a pond or something around here?" "There's a big lake on the far side of the forest," Don Minnie said. "But who's going to entice the gruncher into that? Not us, and certainly not you. He'd be on you before you'd even got within 10 yards of him." "But you did say the gruncher can't see in front of him because of all the clouds of smoke he blows," little Billy said. "Quite true," Don Minnie said. "But how is that going to help us? I don't think the gruncher is ever going to fall into the lake. He never goes out of the forest." "I think I will know how to make him fall in," little Billy said. "What I want," little Billy went on, "is a bird that is big enough to carry me." Don Minnie thought about this for a while, and then he said, "You are a very small boy, and because of that, I think a swan could carry you quite easily." "Call up a swan," little Billy said. Suddenly there was new authority in his voice. "But I hope you're not going to do anything dangerous," Don Minnie cried. "Listen carefully," little Billy said, "because you must tell the swan exactly what he has to do. With me on his back he must fly down to the gruncher. The gruncher will smell me and know that I am very close, but he won't see me through all the steam and the smoke. He'll go mad trying to get at me. The swan will tantalise him by flying back and forth right in front of him. Is that possible?" "Quite possible," Don Minnie said, "except that you might easily fall off. You have no flying practice at all." "I'll hang on somehow," Little Billy said. Then the swan, keeping very low, will fly off through the forest with the ravenous gruncher hotfoot in pursuit. The swan will keep just ahead of the gruncher all the time, driving him crazy with my smell. And in the end, the swan will fly straight over the big, deep lake, and the gruncher, now travelling at a terrific speed, will follow right behind. Presto! He's in the lake. "My boy," Don Minnie cried, "you are a genius. Will you do it?" "Call up the swan," Little Billy ordered. Don Minnie turned to one of the robins which had just come back from a practice flight with a child minpin on its back. Little Billy heard him talking to the robin in a kind of curious twitter. He couldn't understand a word of it. The robin nodded its head and flew off.